from that moment on, I said, this is going to be the question of our generation. Are you real? Is this real? Is what I'm looking at real? And once again, for the last, I don't know, what's 2018 to 2016, 8 years or so, I got laughed at or confused. Like, what do you mean, are you real? What? That's too heady, da, 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 da. And I would say, no, you're going to understand someday that that is the question of our time. Is this real? Right? Like, is what I'm looking at reality? Is going to be it. And here we are in 2026. And once again, I'd like to say that was pretty spot on of a prediction, to say the least.
Justin Bolognino, welcome to From Vision to Creation. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me today.
Thank you for having me. For the last, I don't know how many, 15 plus years now, we've said our company is from the meta to the physical, which is ultimately the same exact thing as vision to creation.
And Justin, I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Your work lives at the intersection of technology, design, and human connection. But at its core, it's about presence. You don't just create experiences people attend, you create environments people feel and carry with them. From founding Meta to shaping immersive worlds like Spirit Lake at Halloween, your work has quietly redefined how we gather, connect, and experience art together, which I think is so cool. I'm excited to explore how this path came together, the role intuition has played along the way, and how projects like Unreality and Silent G Farms reflect where you're headed next.
Great start. Thank you.
Of course. Well, before we dive into meta and immersive experiences, I want to start with you, Justin. What did your early life look like? And what did your curiosity around technology, art, and human connection first begin?
Sure. My early life looked like suburban blue collar upstate New York. I grew up just north of Albany, and I grew up in an Italian imported food store, as the name might suggest. Yes, kids did tease me for not only having bologna in my name, but also serving and slicing bologna from as long as I could stand at the meat slicer. It was a 75-year-old business. And, there's I've been joking with my father for 30 some odd years now, like he really ruined the definition of work for me. By, I wouldn't say he made me work in the store, but I worked in the store, and I mean, I worked in the store. So, weekends, summers, I was there. My friends, I would only see my friends when they'd come in to make a sandwich. And I'm being a little bit hyperbolic to poke at my father a little bit, but not that hyperbolic. I worked a lot growing up at the family business.
Was working at the family business what made you decide that you did not want to pursue a conventional path?
Yeah, that had to be certainly part of it. I mean, I was the third generation, and I think all eyes were on me to kind of pick up the torch from my father, like he did with his own father. But yeah, that was definitely not in the cards for me. I grew up definitely an artist. When I was quite young, I think in first grade, I got a mark on my report card that wasn't on the card, and so my parents had to call out of confusion. And they didn't, I want to make it clear, because my parents think that I'm knocking them in saying this, but I'm not at all. I reward them in saying this, but they did not want me to be an artist. Creativity and artistry was not a career. My mother's literally a first generation off the boat Sicilian, and to them, a career was a lawyer or a doctor, and art was not a career. And they didn't know any better. Did I have the best possible middle class childhood? Absolutely. And I even, from the house I was born into to the house that I grew up in, there was a little upward mobility even within my family, because my father ran such an extraordinary service business. So if I've really learned anything in that time, it was the meaning of service. and the meaning of, helping other people at the most primal level with food, essentially. And my father is an absolute master of service, to say the least.
I can appreciate that, Justin, because I think that when you do have the creative bug when you're growing up, when you want to be an artist, most of the times, especially if you come from a family that weren't artists, it's hard for them to understand you. And again, not knocking the conventional path because there's a lot to be admired there. And, a lot of people go for that and they love it and that's great.
Of course.
But when you are young and you have a totally different vision of what you want your life to be, it can feel a little lonely, maybe a little confusing at times. At what point in your life did you graduate from having the itch to do something creative to saying, okay, I actually want to jump into this? And not only do I want to be creative, I want to start to build worlds.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first, I don't know how old I was. I must have been 7 or 8 years old, but I will never forget having, and you asked about intuition, so, I'll speak from that standpoint. But I remember 6 or 7 years old, be, and this is a recurring theme, being told intuitively, I don't know where that comes from, but that I would make live movies. And I didn't know what that meant. I wanted to be a director, right, as a kid, a TV director and a commercial director. I was obsessed with like Nike commercials when I was young, from a creative and artistic standpoint. But there was this voice that was like, "You're going to make live film." And again, like it took me 15 years to even begin to go, "Oh, wait a minute. I think I'm starting to understand what that even means." And so when I was, I think, 13, I was given a guitar, my first guitar lessons. Although all I wanted was to play the drums. Another family joke. All I wanted was to play the drums. Please, can I play the drums? No drums. How about a guitar? I took a guitar. I started taking guitar lessons. I had a high school band, nothing special. But in college, when I went to college, I met on day one of going to college, who would become my best friend, Adam Macchia. And we were going to form a band. Like the day we met, we decided that, and we did. And our band was called Loop Dreams. And Loop Dreams was, one of the first of its kind live electronic bands is what it would be called. But I think, that's another kind of pattern throughout my career, is doing things that didn't have a name and then would later become called things, right? Like immersive experiences. Like those are names that came after we were doing whatever the hell we were doing. I pride myself on there not being a name for whatever it was that we're doing. And then kind of culture and society comes later and starts naming these things. So Loop Dreams was, we were trying to sound like DJs, but with live instruments and no sequencing. That was our rule. So we wanted to sound like LTJ Bookham, and kind of electronic acts like that, but all on instruments, right? So, and then a bunch of other bands kind of came up, and this is circa 99, 1999, 2000. And we did very well for ourselves, my little college band. We headlined the Wetlands. That was like our biggest claim to fame. We played a festival or two back in the day. And so, all of this is to say that I have to cite Phish, the band Phish. So when I was 15, I saw my first Phish show. And why that's special is because I think seeing Phish, and especially their lighting designer, Chris Kuroda, was my first taste of something synesthetic, right? Like seeing the lights match to the music was a huge key in opening something inside of me, that there's more than, these isolated things, that in fact, maybe the lights are the music and the music is the lights. And, helping out with festivals in college. I worked on a festival called geez, Berkfest in Western Massachusetts, which was like a precursor to Bonnaroo and what would then become Coachella. And so I was like a little intern guy running around helping out at festivals. And in the Wetlands in New York, I spent a lot of time with Johnny Beach, who was kind of my other best friend in my college days, and being immersed in that world, and and seeing a lot of Phish shows, and also studying a lot of philosophy and existentialism and Eastern religion in college, all kind of help shape this worldview of integration, of synthesis, of bringing many things together to create one thing. And I was always kind of the guy, you know, even in the basement of our college parties, like making sure the lighting was cool and all that sort of the side of the spectrum. I had in my band, I had a table with toys on it, like a noise making toys that I would run through my pickup on my guitar and loop the sounds of like ray guns and stuff like that. So always kind of, and I didn't want to sound like a guitar. My goal was to play guitar but never sound like I was playing guitar ever. Yeah, I think that kind of playful defiance is always a part of the game here.
I'm glad you brought up the band Fish because you've actually worked with Fish, Skrillex, and St. Vincent, you know, incredible visuals for their shows. How has that industry changed, creatively speaking, in terms of what you're capable of creating for the sets since you started up until this point?
Sure. Well, the evolution of that industry is really what led to Meta being born. Originally, it was Meta Agency, circa about 2009, 2010. And so the idea there was that there's this kind of new form of artistry, and the kind of the core technological component to that was real time technologies, right? So Ableton Live and Touch Designer, and there were technologies that were now allowing you to manipulate visuals and audio and everything else really in real time. That's the defining difference, right? So everything used to be linear. You'd set it up and then you push play and it would play linearly. But now you can manipulate in real time. And this bore a whole new type of artistry from projection mapping, creative coding, interactive installation. So, circa the late aughts into the early 2010s, there were all these new artists that were coming up that were the coolest artists on the planet, but no one knew what to do with them. And they were definitely not getting paid and they were definitely not getting named. They were signing terrible work for hire deals where they would own nothing. And so, I stepped in with Meta early on and started signing that type of artist to make them stars of the show, right? So it was this, as I was that type of artist at the same time, I think if I've done anything in my career, it's been supporting fellow artists to thrive as much as they possibly could in exchange for the kind of the symbiotic nature of myself and Meta and my other company at the time, Learned Evolution, to be able to again symbiotically thrive together. So that the real time technology, I think that's kind of the biggest turning point, and then deciding like maybe it's in my name, Justin, just my only boy I named just to get the point across a little bit more clearly. But like this sense of fairness, right? Like there's so much unfairness out there, and I've always kind of been a warrior for fairness and doing the right thing and doing what's fair and right on behalf of my fellow artists.
The real time technology, that's actually a really interesting point. And I've always been curious about that. So when you're at a huge festival and a DJ is playing his set, he or she they're obviously choosing their set list in real time. So what you're saying is that the light show, the display is programmed in such a way that it adapts to whatever set list that they're going to play when they're performing.
Yeah, sometimes, but oftentimes not. And for me personally, that's like a dividing line, right? Like I want my art to be alive. I want it to feel alive. I want it to feel like at any moment it could fall off the rails, right? That's what makes a live experience exciting. And so there is plenty of playback still going on. I mean, you get into big pop shows with a lot of moving parts and moving elements and design like that. I mean, that stuff's all time coded down to the millisecond. And that's great. There's a lot to be said about that. But I prefer the stuff that's more improvisational in nature, and allows for you to be able to manipulate things in real time because you can feel that as an audience member. And I think, especially with what's going on with automation and AI and agentic AI and all that stuff, I truly, truly, and deeply believe that musicality, artistry, improvisation, that the most human things that cannot be replicated are going to be the most valuable things over time.
How has AI changed your industry for the better, and how has it made it worse, in your opinion?
I use AI all the time. I liken AI, I think that it's a tool is a trope, almost a cliche at this point. But I have been thinking a lot about AI as an effect lately, right? Like, if you're using Premiere or Ableton or Logic or anything or playing guitar and you put an effect on, right? Like a delay or distortion or something like that, like that kind of is how I've been thinking about AI these days. It's like it's another effect, right? And when you do what we do, where you're using literally tens of tools, if not hundreds of tools, by the time you get to the final output from all the different types of software that you're using, all the different types of hardware, power tools, analog tools. AI is like one tool in the box. And I think, it has led to a certain amount of efficiencies for us. Like, I use it kind of as a rendering tool where I wouldn't in the past. I would have gone on Google and made a mood board, and maybe now I can go the next step and make a rendering of an idea. But we only use AI where it augments us and would never replace us. Like, in other words, I wouldn't have the budget to hire a rendering artist necessarily. If I did have the budget, I would hire a rendering artist. But if I don't have the budget for a rendering artist and a rendering would be helpful, you can bet I'm going to jump into Midjourney and make that rendering. What would I have done in the past? I would have gone on Google Image Search or Pinterest and pulled a bunch of images together. So it's ultimately, outside of maybe the environmental impact, which is again another kind of question mark over this whole thing. I mean, it's ultimately the same thing, right? So in my mind, like if I was going to search for it on Google anyway, that I have no problem using it for Midjourney. When we get into replacing of artists, that's when I think you have to put your foot down, or the replacing of media, right? Like there has to be a line drawn between slop, which is ultimately just prompting something, taking that output and using it and calling it art or calling it creativity. No, that's slop. It has a purpose, but that purpose is very, very, very limited and I think boring at the end of the day. If I've been obsessed with watching Yorgos Lanthimos movies now after watching Begonia, and I went back to Lobster, and obviously, was it Pretty Things? What was the one a couple years ago? Um, I forget the name, but with the other one with Emma in it. But anyway, it's like watching this is the whole time thinking like this is what AI can never replace, which is a voice. No amount of AI ever is going to have a voice like that. In fact, AI synthesizes and creates things that all look the same. Like that's the goal of AI, is to synthesize things to be the same. And so the greater your artistic voice, right, the more singular your voice is, I think the more valuable of a creative you're going to be in the end. So, it remains to be seen. The final thing I'll say is that I found in using AI for years, and I mean, we've been using LLMs and generative technologies for 15 plus years at this point, in different ways with visuals. I mean, and so I think even the word AI itself, artificial intelligence, is marketing. I think it's a little disingenuous. I think what we're talking about is software or an effect, right? Or maybe a plugin is another good way to look at it. I don't think we're heading towards AGI. I don't think adding more information into the system is going to lead to better output necessarily. Maybe to a degree, we'll see. I've been wrong many times before, but I've also been right a fair share of times. But the final point I wanted to make is in using these tools, I've found that I spend as much time maybe sometimes more time cleaning up for shit that AI has done than if I were to have just done it manually in the first place. Because at the end of the day, all AI does is hallucinate, right? And like the window of it getting right is a little wider, or maybe getting a little wider, but it still is always hallucinating. It's still outputting incorrect information. It's still making things up. It still feels weird, as photorealistic as it might be. A 5 second clip is cool, but try making a 5 minute film out of 5 second clips using AI. And I think you're going to find yourself spending as much time dealing with how trash it is as you would have if you were to just make the film using, more traditional tools.
From someone who has spent a lot of time going to DJ sets, music festivals, at a period of my life where I was really into that, I feel that I saw the changes happening, for the sets in terms of what's visually possible and new ideas that people bring to their sets in terms of their visuals. And I saw them get better and better and more sophisticated over the years. And I think that, to your point, I mean, AI couldn't have done that because AI could have only continued to replicate what has already been done and maybe draw very minor inspiration, but real breakthroughs, especially in terms of artistic breakthroughs, that comes from consciousness, which AI will never have.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better. I know. I was going to say I think, but I know we already have super intelligence, right? I think when you're lonely and you're locked away on an island, you start to think that like this technological tool can provide super intelligence, but we have super intelligence. It's what happens when a bunch of really smart and really creative people come together with their minds. I rely on super intelligence all the time with what we do. With something like Spirit Lake, there's over 400 people at the end of the day working on this thing. And there is absolutely, definitely a force that that is generated when all this creative human energy comes together. Gifts start appearing. I don't know how, outside of, those creative humans coming together, but like problems start to solve themselves right when they need to be solved by some greater force. And I like to call that force superintelligence. But it's a human force combined with technology. We're so addicted to being myopic and trying to look at one thing and calling that one thing the whole thing. But that's just not how it works. Again, to do something like the Oracle at Spirit Lake, which was a big spoof on AI, which, I think gets to a lot of these sort of things that I'm talking about. The number of tools and the number of humans that touched that project by the time we were doing it, it's crazy. And to look at just AI, there are a lot of haters out there that are like, "Oh, you're using AI." It's like you're using AI to complain about this, right? It's in the channel. If you're on Instagram complaining about us using AI, you're using AI while you're complaining about it. It's in there somewhere. And so to isolate it is the problem. That's what I'm saying. To be myopic about it. And again, that's what slop is, which is just one prompt and one output. Yes, complain all day, as will I. But like, if AI is one tool in your huge box of tools and people are complaining about that, I don't know what to tell them.
That's a great point. And I want to hear more about the Oracle. Tell us about what that project is, what your goals were, and how it resonated with people who were attending Spirit Lake.
All great questions. Okay. So this year I said early on, I was like, I haven't done a costume. Like I haven't worn a costume. So that kind of started there. And then, I've been doing the lake show. So it kind of at the center, at the physical center. I said center and someone complained. They were like, "Oh yeah, JB, you think your work is at the center of Spirit Lake?" Like, no, I meant it like literally proximally. It's literally environmentally at the center of Spirit Lake. So that's what I mean, just in case anyone's listening. But at the center is this lake, and I do the lake show, and it's usually a couple hours on loop. And I've always wanted to make it interactive. Like, how can we make how can we make the lake show interactive so people can participate? Because one of the rules of Spirit Lake this year was that everything had to be participatory. I didn't want to curate anything that was static whatsoever, right? So everything had to have some sort of interactive element to it. So how do you do that? I don't know. And so I think this is how creativity works. You plant seeds in the garden along the way. Like I want to do a costume. I want to make the lake show interactive. I don't know how. And then you continue to look. And so in working with Young and Sick, who for 3 years has done the art of Spirit Lake, one of the iterations for the poster design he made is this like crazy eyeball with all these eyes and mouths around it. And immediately I saw that thing and I was like, oh my God, that's the thing, right? Like, what if we put this thing at the center of Spirit Lake and you could ask it questions and it would answer you in real time? And what if it was like the Oracle of Spirit Lake? And, all that kind of just happened, right? Like, as soon as I saw the art, within 10 seconds, the whole line of thinking just emerged, right? Because those seeds had been planted. And so that's what I jumped on. It's like, all right, how are we going to do this? Like, there's no way I can build a real time AI because our audience would absolutely hang me if we did that, nor would I want to do that at all. But then I was like, well, wait a minute. What if that's the Halloween costume? What if the Halloween costume is we trick the audience into thinking we built an AI with this huge eyeball over the lake, this big holographic, misty, psychedelic eyeball that you could ask it questions, and in real time it will answer your questions. And the costume was that it's AI. But really, it's me talking through a microphone through a bunch of analog guitar pedals, totally Wizard of Oz style, right? Answering questions in real time. And so, there were three main influences. One, the Oracle of Delphi, right? Like, you'd go and ask the Oracle questions and she would answer your questions with their indubitable wisdom. The second was HAL 9000, right? Like this kind of all controlling eye looking out over everything. And then the third was the Wizard of Oz, was like, no, there's really just some idiot behind the scenes doing it all who doesn't really know what they're doing, right? And then so it goes on and on and on. It's like, okay, so what if the story was that over time the AI got worse, right? Kind of like HAL 9000 and kind of like just my own experience with AI where like or eventually it sucks and you have to restart it, right? And then get a fresh agent going or whatever. And so that was the story. So on night one, it was like really sycophantic, just like AI is. So if you asked it a question, I'd be like, yes, that's a great question. You must be a highly intelligent person. And then I'd answer the question either by improvising, and I was 600 feet away in headphones. I couldn't see anything. I had a little monitor, but it was kind of meaningless. So I had no idea what was going on. I was totally isolated, just trying to like feel the vibe of the question and speak to it. So I had like a stack of books that I was reading from or just improvising an answer because that's also what AI is. So the whole thing was this big like satirical spoof on like what would AI do in this circumstance? But then by Saturday night, and it just completely lost its mind. Right now we're in like full HAL 9000. Like, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't help you. But like, I got worse, and people were telling me like when the Oracle would get feisty, people would really like that. And so the Oracle was mean a few times, and like like I'm gonna take over the world, and it would slip, and then it would talk about love, and so like that was the performance of it. Now, to answer your question about how it was received, well, I think that really depends on when you came, right? If you came and I was talking about universal consciousness or reading out of a David R. Hawkins, or I read a lot of the Tao Te Ching and a Terence McKenna and stuff like that. If you came during one of those moments, your experience was probably awesome. But if you came at 3 a.m. on Saturday when the Oracle had completely lost its shit and it was just like loops and effects and feedback and noise, and I would come out and just like I have no regrets about anything that happened with the Oracle. But at one point, someone asked the question two times someone asked, is a hot dog a sandwich? And the first time I was kind of like, oh, Jesus, fuck off. And the second time I was like, that is a stupid fucking question, right? Because at that point, the Oracle had lost its mind. Now, a lot of people cited that online in the follow ups as like, what, this thing sucks. Like, how dare it say that? I had a bad trip. It was like, look, I was doing performance art at the end of the day, and I don't feel bad about it. But like, I probably shouldn't have said that particular bit. But it was all for the fun of the performance and for upholding this kind of fun narrative. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
That is so cool, though, Justin. I think that is one of the most creative projects that's ever been talked about on the show. I wish I
Thank
could have
you.
experienced it. That's really
I
cool.
feel that way. It is, and it's also an example of like what you can do when no one says anything. It's like there's always clients, there's always a board, there's always an approval process. But with the Oracle, I had just complete unadulterated creativity. No one even knew what I was doing with this thing until we did it. But a lot of people loved it. Don't get me wrong, but there were definitely plenty of people that did not appreciate the Oracle, which makes it great, right? Like that's great art, I think.
Exactly. I was going to say you made people feel so whether they were
Thank you.
yes,
Correct.
that's the point.
Correct. Yes. And it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. Just if you look at the videos and the photos of this giant eyeball mistily hovering over the lake, it was really beautiful to me.
And Justin, I want to go back just a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
talk about your founding Meta. And I
Mm-hmm.
it was founded on the belief that creative technologists deserve recognition equal to the brands and artists they support.
Mm-hmm.
Why was that mission so important to you personally when you were getting started?
Well, because I am one of them. Um, when you're making art and experiences that don't have a name yet and aren't being recognized, right? Like I spent, I don't know, the first 10 years of doing Meta, we would get laughed at. We would go to all the museums, like even the technological driven museums, and be like, look, immersive experiences are the future, and we can sell tickets to this stuff, and we can build these worlds. And we got laughed out of every single place, right? Um, there was not the recognition that this was art. Like I can't sell this, to a collector. So how is this even art, right? Like, that I got that feedback for a decade in doing what we're doing. This is long before the Meow Wolves of the world and all the kind of like ticketed immersive experiences that would come later. Everything that we do is so kind of ephemeral and mandala-esque, like it was there and then it was gone. And so it was very difficult to represent these things. And also, I mean, baseline, it's just the coolest shit. It was the coolest shit. It was the coolest shit at the time. It's what everyone's taking photos and eventually videos of early on and sharing on social media, but no one was crediting them. And so I'd see all this artist work and I'd be like, oh, that's Beeple or whatever, and like no one was crediting Beeple. No one even knew Beeple existed. And so, I wanted to help build a mechanism, help build an infrastructure so that when you saw Beeple's work, you could go, oh, it's Beeple.
Yeah, and Justin, I'm finding it interesting that you were already anticipating this being a thing and people actually craving experiences like this way before it started to happen because now in today's day and age where everybody's on their phone, I feel like people crave human connection and experiences more than ever. But yet you were anticipating that before people were so addicted to their screens. What do you think it was in you that wanted to create an immersive experience, even when you were being laughed at, trying to sell the concept when it was way ahead of its time?
I mean, it's just how I saw. Again, I have to go back to Phish, right? Like I consider Phish to be the greatest American art project that's ever existed. I don't think anything even comes close. I think you could study their 42 years of output and put it against anything from just a baseline craft creativity experience. The level that that band plays on creatively and technically, there's no nothing to compare it to, right? It stands in a league of its own, but it's participatory. Like, what makes it special is you are the band. They're the first to say that. um, the energy is the thing that we're playing with, and we're all playing with it together. And so that sense of interconnection, all the synchronicity that arises when you are within an experience, that's just how I saw the best experiences. And then, with the rise of EDM in the late aughts, with the likes of the Skrillexes of the world, pushing the live production boundaries, pushing the line between artist and participant, destroying the fourth wall. That's just what the coolest. That's just what the coolest stuff was, and it's still the coolest. It's still the coolest stuff. So I don't know. And looking back, like, it didn't seem hard to predict, but I will maybe not so humbly agree that I have been about 10 years early on on most things, right down to the name of my company. And then I'll cite another thing that I'm currently very proud of. So we launched this brand right here, Unreality. Can you read that? It says, "Are you real?" Let's see if I can get a better lighting. So it says, "Are you real?" Oh, there we go. It says, "Are you real?" And then, there we go. And it says, "You are." And so this was the launch of the Unreality brand in 2018 at Coachella, asking the question, "Are you real?" And from that moment on, I said, this is going to be the question of our generation. Are you real? Is this real? Is what I'm looking at real? And once again, for the last, I don't know, what's 2018 to 2016, 8 years or so, I got laughed at or confused. Like, what do you mean, are you real? What? That's too heady. Da, 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 da. And I would say, no, you're going to understand someday that that is the question of our time. Is this real? Right? Like, is what I'm looking at reality? Is going to be it. And here we are in 2026, and once again, I'd like to say that was pretty spot on of a prediction, to say the least. And so, that brand Unreality that we first brought to life in 2018, I think, only gets more relevant with each day passing.
Well, interesting that you bring up reality because, even just, and this is a very small example, but my experience recording the show, I have my own interpretation and perspective on how I feel the conversation is going right now, moment in time. I'm going to watch it later on. And every single time I watch an interview for the first time
Mm,
after having the conversation,
mm,
think, oh my God, I have a totally different idea of how it went. I didn't notice this and things like that. And then here's where it gets really interesting, Justin.
mm.
I'll watch it again and then I'll change my mind again. So,
Uh-huh.
what is reality?
Then you have your audience that I'm sure will bring up all sorts of things you never thought of or disagree with completely. And I might ask yourself, what reality are these people even living in?
Hmm.
What is reality? Great question. The first thing that comes to mind as you bring it up, because you almost hit on all of them, is Ken Wilber's four quadrants. I'm a huge, huge Ken Wilber guy. I think Ken Wilber's integral philosophy is the most dynamic mechanism through which to understand reality, or he would call it a map of reality. We have our own map of reality. And so reality is one thing and only one thing, yet simultaneously all the things combined. It's kind of like the color white, right? So the four quadrants are: I subjective, that's my subjective experience; I objective, or it, right, which is the objective individual. Then you have the we subjective, what it means to be a part of this collective group, or what we call culture. And then you have the it's objective, which is the collective objective, which we call social or society or sociological. And so the integration of those four things simultaneously is what defines reality. It's my subjective experience. It's the objective biological, physiological body which inhabits that subjective experience. It's the cultural, combinant, collective meaning of that experience. And it's the objective, social, systems based understanding. And so four of those things simultaneously are at play. And so if you want to understand reality, you have to at least look at those four elements, and all of it's taking place right here in the ever present moment. There is no future, there is no past, there is only the now. And so all of this arises, this so called reality, within now. And so, that's the very baby starter framework for answering the question, what is reality?
Excellent answer.
Thanks.
And Justin, how do you think immersive environments reveal parts of ourselves we don't normally access in everyday life?
One thing that we set out to do years ago was to define what immersive meant, because there's so many definitions and there's not kind of one singular definition. So we set out to do that, and we designed what we call the map of realities. And so the map of realities has six primary components, right? These are I could even go so far as to say these are the six primary components of creativity, right? So at the core, so it's a hexagon like this. So at the bottom point of the hexagon is sonic reality, right? Uh, the waves of sound, music is the baseline. Everything is music. Everything is sonic. Everything is waves, right? And so that's why sonic is there at the bottom. And then when you go to the right, you have IRL, in real life. This is now physical reality. Go up a notch and you have conscious reality. That's now metaphysical reality. So on the right side of the map, you have analog reality, right? And so, or analog technology. So you have sound, physical, metaphysical, and then the top you have augmented reality, which is the combination of digital reality and analog reality combined. And then on the top left, you have virtual reality, which is full digital immersion. And then you have URL, which is digital technology, right? So these are the six primary realities of immersive or of creativity. And those are what you combine together to create new immersive realities. It's not one or the other. It's never one or the other. You can't have a VR experience without the consciousness perceiving the VR experience. So it's not about one or the other experience. It's about how you integrate these different forms of reality together to create your experience. So the map of realities is at the heart. I call it the flux capacitor, for the Back to the Future fans out there. The map of realities is it's the syntax of unreality. It's the search mechanism. It's how we define what makes an immersive experience.
And Justin, this next question might be kind of difficult to answer because I'm assuming it's
Ooh, how exciting!
I'm assuming it now it better be good.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm assuming that the answer to this question, you have to rely a little bit more on a feeling than you do
Mm.
logic. But
Oh, let's go.
when you're putting together an experience, I'm sure you have initially a vision of what you think it's going to be like. As you're putting it together, I'm sure it kind of starts to take on a life of its own and kind of show you the next direction that things kind of need to take to achieve the final outcome. My question is, at what point during setup and execution do you decide we're finished? This is it.
Well, if the show opens at 2 p.m., I would say it's at about 1:59 p.m. I mean, oh my God. Oh, I don't know if I've ever finished anything ever in my life. At some point, you just have to move on to the next thing. Um, Yeah, no, I mean, okay, if I answer that, it would contradict what I said before, which is that I don't believe there is time. There is no past. There is no future. There's only the present moment. So how could anything be finished, right? There's no beginning or ending. There's only begendings. There's no subjectivity or objectivity. There's only subjectivity. I mean, I could do this all day, and that's not just a theoretical idea. That's like an embodied way of being. Um, and I think it's so important, especially with all the chaos out there and the deluge and tsunami of information coming at us at any given time. I think, having a really good surfboard to ride the tsunami is the most essential thing you can do. Surfboard there being your worldview, the framework, your understanding of reality is the surfboard. And if you don't have a good one, you are going to get swallowed up by that tsunami.
You've founded Unreality, a platform dedicated to immersive arts. What gap did you feel needed to be filled that led you to create it?
Well, first of all, Unreality, we've been working on this thing for over 8 years. One of my mottos is move slow and evolve things. And yes, that is a playful tap at move fast and break things, which is a motto that I've always found to be highly problematic. And I think if you look around at the world around you now, you can see why that's such a problematic saying and set of actions. But move slow and evolve things is our motto, and basically there is not a platform for creatives, right? Who don't want to be creators necessarily. What do I mean? I mean, a creative is someone that does anything. I mean, it literally anything. It could be that you work in spreadsheets all day, but you could approach that with creativity. A creative, right, does whatever form of creativity that they do. A creator makes content to monetize on social media. These are different things, right? Now, there's tons of overlap, and creators are creative and creatives are creators all day long. But there is a huge need out there for people that want to deliver the work that they deliver without having to be good at getting social media likes and whatnot from that work, right? And again, all are welcome, and there's going to be and are plenty of creators on the platform, but there is a yearning for people that want to make the oracle, right? Like me, like I can speak for myself here very much. Like the amount of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours that go into making something like the Oracle of Spirit Lake, and then I got to make a video of me talking about it that's optimized for the algorithm. And no, I don't want to deal with that. I want the work that I made to be enough, right? And so Unreality is really primarily for those people, and there are tens of millions of them uh, in the world that want to just make their work, whatever it is, and have a way to showcase it. Now, one of the key components, and I think this is also part of the AI discussion, I think you're going to see, especially this year, the rise of process video, the rise of process content, right? Where there's all this content that shows that like a bunch of humans made this thing and then it wasn't just prompted, right? And so core to Unreality, we have what are called project updates, right? So these are like stories, but for your projects, right? So where you are iterating and telling the story of your project over time through project updates. And one of the unique things about Unreality, and again, you can use it like every other form of social media all you want. We're not discluding anyone from doing so. But one of the things about Unreality is this ability to iterate over time and to kind of share your work in the name of that being a resourcing tool, right? If you need other creative humans to come onto your project, or vice versa, or you're looking to be a creative human for someone else's project, this idea of project updates is kind of the lifeblood to get us there. So, if you can see process, that's going to really help you to understand, who's best for a given project, what resources are needed for a given project, and to essentially predict, what's needed for that given project. But it's all project based. It's we're trying to, and one other point to answer your question is there's so much noise out there on social platforms. There's politics and baby photos and hot bodies and like all this stuff, and then that's great. Um, but we really want to create a place that's just about your work. That's just about your projects. That's just about your creativity, and even immersive. Like for years, we really focused on immersive. We're past that now. Now it's just about creativity. There's not really a place that's like LinkedIn, which is definitely not designed for creatives and showcasing your work. That's what we've built. It's a social resourcing tool. So it's very much a social network, like all the other social networks, but built for resourcing, for finding each other, and for collaborating. Collaboration is what the game is all about. Again, back to my original point about superintelligence. You get to superintelligence by collaboration with other creative humans, and Unreality is the platform to do it.
And how do you see creativity evolving over time, Justin, both in the social media landscape as well as immersive experiences?
Oof, my God, I could do an entire podcast just on that question. So first, let's break down creativity into three component parts. I like to think of everything triadically. Like music, you have your tonic, your third, and your fifth in music. That creates a triad, that creates a chord. And so creativity has three main components. You have lowercase c creativity, that's craft, that's the physicality, that's the playing, right? Then you have uppercase C creativity. That's the collaboration. That's now when multiple creative humans come together and plus energy, right? There has to be energy there. That's uppercase C creativity. Then you have all caps creativity, which is the force, which is consciousness, which is the underlying love or again force truth whatever you want to say at the base layer of it all. So that's you could use the G word. I try not to, because as soon as you start to use words to describe this, it's no longer the thing that it isn't, right? So I think that's more of like a Taoist perspective. But so those are the three levels of creativity. There's the craft of it, there's the collaboration of it, and then there's tapping into the force of it. And so what the future holds, geez, I don't know what the future is, because there's only the ever present now. So bad question for me.
But totally fair, and I think that is it is an interesting perspective and an interesting answer. Um, and one another thing that I want to touch on, Justin, is Silent G Farms,
Yeah.
because that feels like the natural counterbalance to large scale festivals. What called you to create a retreat centered on nature, wellness, and creative exploration?
Yeah, I mean, how do you get to creativity without safety? How do you get to creativity without nature? How do you get to creativity without wellness, right? Like the, those are the most important elements to being creative. If I'm not well, sure as shit I'm not being creative. Nature is creativity. There is no difference, right? And I like to use the word nature to replace the G word. A lot of people say the universe now, but the universe is too out there and it's too forgiving. Nature doesn't give a fuck about you. Nature provides and provides and provides infinitely, but will also eat your body with maggots within a couple days after you're gone. Nature will just keep creating, destroying, and maintaining, creating, destroying, and maintaining. So nature is a much more active word for kind of how the force plays itself out here on this very strange and beautiful and precious planet. that we live in. So being in that safe space, being in the womb of the farm allows for so much creativity to come forth. And I have 11 years of my own personal experiences and many hundreds of other people who have felt that way about it. When you have all of those elements combined and you do feel that safe, the creativity pours through, and you're able to tap into it so much easier and more efficiently.
Finding the balance between, you know, going within or going into nature to find inspiration or to recharge your battery so that you can go out into the world and create, and actually going out and being in that mode of creation. I think that it can be difficult to find the right balance. And I think that oftentimes people who aren't super in touch with themselves can maybe miss that they're off balance. Are there any tells that you've seen or experienced in your life or working with others that can indicate that maybe you're out of balance and you need to spend a little bit more time in nature or reflecting or
Well, you said it and you caught yourself. You said the line. Where is the line? I think as long as you're assigning lines, you're out of balance. There is no line between within and without, right? It's the Beatles song, maybe their best, within you, without you. There is no line. And when we try to make all these lines, and then you start looking at the lines and going, well, is this inside the line? Is this outside the line? Like, it's the lines that are the lack of balance. It's understanding that we are nature. We are the universe. There is not nature out there where the woods are and not nature in here. We are nature. It's when we create these imaginary lines that we fall out of balance.
that is brilliant. And I think that that is exactly what I needed to hear at this moment in my life, Justin. You have no idea. That answer is worth its weight in gold for me. And I think that
Ah,
other people listening are going to feel the same way.
great.
There are many external factors that contribute to our creating these imaginary lines and
Yeah.
restrictions that we place on ourselves. For somebody who feels burdened by these lines that they've created, what would be the first thing that you say to, first of all, recognize that they're made up? And also, what can they do to feel free from those expectations placed on themselves?
Again, you said it. We need the lines. You need ego, right? It's this idea of like ego, no ego is so silly. If you didn't have ego, if you didn't have lines, and I do equate those two things, ego is what makes the lines. We need them. We need a sense of time. I have to get home by 4 o'clock so I can take my kid to piano lesson today, right? Like, yes, we made that up, but we still need it to exist here in the world. It's remembering that we made it up. That's important. And when you get attached to thinking that the lines are what's real, that's when you fall out of balance. And so remembering that we made up the lines, there's no state called New York that I'm in right now. We drew those lines. We need them for tax purposes. New York State, I'm looking at you. Um, and for all these other purposes, but it's remembering that we have agreed upon these things and that these things are not inherently real. They're not a priori there. New York State was not there before we drew those lines. And so again, it's the simultaneity. Okay, that's the word that I'm going to use to answer the question. It's simultaneously understanding that we need to make these lines and that those lines are made up at the same time, right? And to answer your final question, which was to be free of them, that's how you're free of them, is to simultaneously see things, to simultaneously understand that there is up and down, left and right? That there is no line between these two things other than the one that we create ourselves. So if we remember, right, it's the process is called anamnesis. If we remember that we already know this, I think that's what freedom comes from. Freedom is lack of fear. And how do you get to a place of lack of fear? By remembering fear is a word that was just made up. There's actually no such thing as fear. It's an idea that we've created. That doesn't mean you're not going to feel it. It means that you shouldn't get attached to it. Those are two very different things. And so practicing non-attachment, remembering the thoughts you think, don't believe the thoughts you think. They're not even real. The word water, which is a line, we make these little squiggly lines we call words, right? The word water won't quench your thirst.
Hmm.
But if I want a glass of water, I need the word to say, hey, can I get a glass of water, please?
Right.
The simultaneity is freedom.
I love that. And I also love that you brought up that we need to remember that the lines that we need to remember that we are the ones that made them up, because when we acknowledge that, I feel like they lose their seriousness in a way. They feel less
That's
restricted.
right. That's
And
right.
and a great example that you gave was, for example, New York State, that doesn't exist. Those are imaginary lines that we've made up and that we've agreed that this is New York. And it actually reminds me of a really funny, it's a parable. I don't think it ever really happened, but basically there's a farmer he lives in Russia on the border to Estonia, and Russia and Estonia are renegotiating the border line, and they go to and when they arrive at the farmer's farm, they ask him, you have a choice. You can either live in Estonia or you can continue to live in Russia. What would you like to do? And he said, well, I think I'm going to have to go with Estonia because I don't think I can bear another Russian winter.
There you go. Yeah.
What has been the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
I mean, I just said it, but I would say it's the simultaneity. It's both and. It's not either or. Um, and my God, if you look around with what's going on in the world right now, we could use a whole lot more both and a whole lot less either or. Either or others us. And again, like if there's if there's no world left to be had because we blew it up, then what's the point in preparing for it? It makes no sense to me. Again, like I am you. I don't mean that hypothetically or theoretically or it's some philosophical idea. That's as literally true as me touching my own head right now. And we need each other, and it has to be both and. And if I've learned anything, it's that we have to proceed with the the simultaneity of both and we have to set aside the either or thinking because that is what's killing us. And if we're going to, I was going to say thrive, if we're going to survive at all as a species, we have got to remember that we are each other, that I am you, that there is no line between us. We all breathe the same air and we all drink the same water. And so the quicker we can remember, because this is not new information. The mystics had this locked up thousands of years ago. That we are each other. That it's the simultaneity of all things. It's not the either or. That's it. I hope that was a good answer. I've kind of already given it, but it's a big question.
And Justin, where is the best place for people to keep up with you in all of your work and upcoming immersive experiences?
I just launched a Substack. I really like Substack because it allows for nuance. In case you haven't noticed throughout the course of this conversation, I think nuance is really important. And I've gotten off Instagram. Normally I would say that, but I've just found it to be too vitriolic and too divisive. And, I don't need to see another angle of the latest shooting in my feed. And I don't need to see someone's opinion of someone's opinion of someone's opinion, which is, now what gets the most views on that algorithm over there. So Substack, I would say, is the answer. However, soon and very soon, when unreality is more widely open to the public, the answer is going to be definitely unreality. But right now, the answer is Substack.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to include the link to that in the episode notes. That way, anybody who wants to easily check out your work can do that by clicking below. And I highly encourage you guys to, because, Justin, I just watched your tour of Spirit Lake and
Yeah.
it was unbelievable.
Thank you.
I'm going to include the link to that video that's on Vimeo as well in the episode notes. And I highly encourage you guys to go watch it, because without seeing what's going on with your own eyes, it's very difficult to imagine how incredible it is. So, I mean, every little detail was so amazing. And so please click below.
Thank you.
If you could go back in time and offer one bit of advice to your younger self, specifically tailored for your life and your life's trajectory, maybe if we could go back to the kid who was working in your family's business in the sandwich shop, what would you tell him?
Take it easy on yourself. I almost started crying right there. Yeah, take it easy on yourself, man. Take it easy. I'm so ruthless to myself. And then, in my worst modes, I project that ruthlessness out onto others. And, but it's all, it's all self. It's all oneself. Just take it easy on yourself. Be kind to yourself.
Yeah, of course. Well, Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was amazing, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, it was so fun. Thanks for the very insightful questions and allowing the light to subtly change throughout the course of the conversation.